Sometimes life finally starts getting better, and instead of feeling relieved, you feel uneasy. Things are working. You're making progress. People notice. Opportunities appear. And then, something strange happens. You procrastinate for no reason. You overthink small mistakes. You start losing motivation. You suddenly feel tired and overwhelmed. It's like your brain quietly pulls the brakes just when everything is moving forward. The confusing part is, you wanted this. This video isn't about laziness or lack of discipline. It's about why success can feel emotionally unsafe. What if the problem isn't your motivation, but what your mind learned about feeling safe when things go well? When things finally begin to move in the right direction, most people expect relief to follow. They imagine calm, confidence, a sense of stability. They imagine waking up one day and feeling lighter because the struggle has started to pay off. And sometimes, for a short moment, that feeling does appear. You notice progress. You feel proud. You feel hopeful. But then something subtle begins to shift. The excitement fades faster than you expected. The pride feels fragile. The hope starts to feel uncomfortable. You might not even notice the change right away. It doesn't arrive dramatically. It appears quietly, like a background noise that slowly gets louder. You wake up feeling tired even after resting. Tasks that once felt exciting start to feel heavy. Small mistakes suddenly feel much bigger than they should. Instead of enjoying the progress, your attention begins scanning for problems. What if this doesn't last? What if I can't keep this up? What if people expect more now? What if I mess this up? The moment that was supposed to feel safe begins to feel uncertain. And this is where confusion starts. Because from the outside, everything looks fine. Maybe even better than fine. You might be doing well at work. Receiving positive feedback. Improving your life. Moving toward goals you've wanted for years. Yet internally, the emotional experience does not match the external reality. Instead of calm, there is tension. Instead of relief, there is pressure. Instead of confidence, there is doubt. This mismatch can feel deeply frustrating. You may start asking yourself what is wrong with you. Why can't I just enjoy this? Why can't I relax? Why do I feel more anxious now than before? These questions often bring guilt with them. You tell yourself you should be grateful. You remind yourself that this is what you worked for. You compare your situation to others who would love to be where you are. And yet the discomfort doesn't disappear. If anything, the guilt adds another layer of pressure. Now you're not only uncomfortable, you're uncomfortable about being uncomfortable. So the mind starts searching for explanations. Maybe I'm tired. Maybe I'm stressed. Maybe I just need a break. Maybe this phase will pass. But the pattern often repeats. Each time life starts moving forward, the same emotional shift appears. At first, there is excitement. Then pressure. Then doubt. Then a quiet loss of momentum. You may begin to notice small behaviors that seem harmless on their own. You delay starting important tasks. You distract yourself with less urgent things. You become unusually critical of your own work. You focus more on what could go wrong than on what is going right. These behaviors don't feel like sabotage. They feel like caution. Like responsibility. Like being careful. But over time, they begin to slow the momentum you were building. You might miss opportunities. Delay decisions. Lose motivation. And eventually, the pace of progress changes. The intense pressure begins to fade. The expectations soften. The emotional tension decreases. Strangely, this moment can feel relieving. Even if the progress slowed. Even if the opportunity passed. Even if the momentum faded. There is relief. This relief can feel confusing. Why would slowing down feel safer than moving forward? Why would losing momentum feel calmer than maintaining it? This is where many people start believing they lack discipline or consistency. They tell themselves they just need more motivation. More structure. More productivity tools. But what if this pattern isn't about discipline? What if it's about emotional safety? Because progress doesn't only bring positive change. It also brings visibility, expectations, and uncertainty. When things improve, attention increases. Responsibility increases. Possibilities expand. And with expansion comes a new emotional landscape. More people notice. More outcomes matter. More possibilities open. And possibilities can feel overwhelming. Success changes the emotional environment. It introduces uncertainty about how long this phase will last. It raises new questions about identity, expectations, and the future. It invites attention that wasn't there before. For some people, this shift feels energizing. For others, it feels destabilizing. You may begin to feel like you are standing on unfamiliar ground. The old problems that once occupied your mind are no longer the center of attention. And without those familiar challenges, the emotional landscape feels different. The mind begins searching for stability in new ways. Sometimes, it searches by slowing things down. By reducing pressure. By reducing expectations. By reducing momentum. Not consciously. Not intentionally. But quietly. Because the nervous system prefers familiar stress over unfamiliar possibility. Familiar stress has known rules. Known limits. Known outcomes. Unfamiliar success does not. And when the nervous system encounters unfamiliar territory, its first goal is not growth. Its first goal is safety. So the moment that was supposed to feel like arrival can begin to feel like exposure. Exposure to expectations. Exposure to responsibility. Exposure to the unknown. And the unknown can feel heavier than the struggle you left behind. Because struggle is predictable. You know how to survive it. You know how to navigate it. You know who you are within it. But success introduces a new question. Who am I now? And that question can quietly reshape your emotional experience long before you find the words to explain it. As momentum begins to grow, another quiet shift often appears, the way you start relating to time. When life is difficult or stagnant, time can feel slow and heavy. Days blend together. Progress feels distant. The future feels vague or far away. But when things begin improving, time suddenly feels faster. Days feel more packed. Weeks feel shorter. Plans begin to fill the calendar. Opportunities appear. Deadlines appear. Expectations appear. And with them comes a new kind of pressure. Not the pressure of surviving problems, but the pressure of sustaining progress. This type of pressure can feel unfamiliar because it asks a different question. Not, how do I get out of this situation? But, how do I keep this going? Maintaining progress can feel more uncertain than creating it. Because progress creates movement, but maintenance requires consistency. Consistency brings visibility. And visibility brings attention. You might notice that when things begin going well, other people start noticing too. Coworkers ask for your opinion. Friends comment on your achievements. Family members express pride or expectations. New opportunities begin to appear. At first, this attention feels validating, encouraging, motivating. But slowly, another layer begins to form beneath it. Expectation. People begin to expect the same level of performance. The same level of motivation. The same level of results. And even when those expectations are not spoken out loud, the mind begins imagining them. They expect me to keep doing well. They expect me to stay motivated. They expect me to know what I'm doing. These imagined expectations can begin to feel heavier than the real ones. Because when the mind imagines expectations, it often imagines the possibility of failing them. The fear doesn't appear as panic. It appears as pressure. Pressure to maintain. Pressure to repeat success. Pressure to not lose momentum. This pressure is subtle but powerful. It transforms progress into responsibility. Before, progress was exciting. Now, it feels like something that must be protected. And protecting progress can feel exhausting. You might begin to notice a shift in how you approach tasks. Instead of curiosity, there is caution. Instead of excitement, there is evaluation. Instead of momentum, there is monitoring. You double-check more often. You hesitate before starting. You think longer before deciding. These behaviors often feel like responsibility or professionalism. But sometimes they are signs of something deeper, emotional scanning. The mind begins scanning for risk. What if this goes wrong? What if I can't keep this level? What if this was just luck? What if I disappoint people? This scanning doesn't stop action immediately. It slows it down. You may still move forward, but with more hesitation. More doubt. More mental effort. Tasks that once felt energizing begin to feel heavier. Not because they became harder, but because the emotional meaning attached to them changed. Now each task feels connected to identity. Each decision feels connected to reputation. Each mistake feels connected to self-worth. This is when progress stops feeling playful and starts feeling serious. Seriousness can feel grounding in small doses. But when it becomes constant, it can drain the energy that originally fueled the progress. You may begin noticing how much mental space is now occupied by anticipation. Anticipating feedback. Anticipating mistakes. Anticipating future outcomes. Your mind spends more time in the future than in the present. And the future is always uncertain. Uncertainty creates tension. Tension creates fatigue. This fatigue is often mistaken for laziness or lack of motivation. But emotional fatigue is different from physical tiredness. You may still have energy to do other things. You may still socialize, scroll, or handle daily tasks. But the specific tasks connected to progress begin to feel heavy. You might open your laptop and suddenly feel tired. Look at a project and feel resistance. Think about your goals and feel overwhelmed. This resistance can feel confusing because it contradicts your desires. You wanted this progress. You worked for this opportunity. You imagined this future. And yet, the closer it gets, the harder it becomes to move toward it. This is the moment where self-doubt begins to speak louder. Maybe I'm not ready. Maybe I'm not as capable as people think. Maybe this success was temporary. These thoughts can feel protective. Like they are preparing you for possible disappointment. But they also have another effect: they reduce momentum. Doubt slows action. Overthinking delays decisions. Hesitation postpones progress. And as momentum slows, the emotional pressure begins to decrease. Deadlines feel less urgent. Expectations feel less immediate. Attention fades slightly. The nervous system experiences this as relief. The relief may be subtle, but it is real. The tension that built during progress softens. The emotional pressure reduces. This relief can create a confusing emotional loop. Progress creates pressure. Pressure creates tension. Tension creates fatigue. Slowing down reduces tension. Reduced tension feels safe. Without realizing it, the nervous system begins associating slowed progress with emotional relief. Not consciously. Not intentionally. But through repetition. The mind learns that moving forward increases pressure, and slowing down reduces it. This learning is emotional, not logical. Logically, you still want success. You still value progress. You still believe in your goals. But emotionally, your nervous system has started linking momentum with tension. And the nervous system always tries to move toward safety. Sometimes safety looks like rest. Sometimes safety looks like distraction. Sometimes safety looks like postponing the next step. These behaviors don't feel like sabotage in the moment. They feel like coping. You tell yourself you just need a break. You say you'll start tomorrow. You promise you'll return when you feel more ready. And often, you genuinely mean it. But the pattern repeats. Each time life begins moving forward, the emotional pressure rises again. Each time the pressure rises, the nervous system searches for relief. And the easiest way to create relief is to slow momentum. Over time, this pattern becomes familiar. You may even begin to expect it. You might notice that whenever things start going well, a quiet voice appears. Don't get too comfortable. Don't get too excited. Don't assume this will last. This voice often sounds cautious and protective. It feels like realism or responsibility. But beneath it is a deeper emotional message. Stay prepared for change. Stay prepared for loss. Stay prepared for disappointment. This emotional preparation can feel safer than allowing yourself to fully enjoy progress. Because enjoyment requires trust. And trust requires vulnerability. Allowing yourself to feel proud, excited, or hopeful means accepting the possibility that those feelings could change. And the possibility of change can feel risky. So the mind quietly holds back. Not to ruin your progress, but to protect you from uncertainty. And this protective instinct often operates long before you become aware of it. Which leads to a deeper question. If the nervous system is trying to protect you, what is it trying to protect you from? When this cycle repeats enough times, you begin to recognize a familiar emotional timeline. At the beginning of something new, there is excitement, curiosity, possibility. Then momentum builds. You start doing the thing consistently. Progress appears. Then attention increases. Expectations rise. Pressure quietly grows. Then tension appears. Fatigue follows. Doubt gets louder. And eventually, momentum slows. The pattern is so subtle that it rarely looks like a pattern. It feels like circumstance, timing, mood, energy levels, life getting busy. But the emotional sequence underneath often follows the same rhythm. And because the rhythm is familiar, your nervous system begins predicting it. You might notice how, after enough repetition, your reaction to progress begins changing earlier and earlier in the cycle. At first, tension appeared only after big progress. Later, it appeared after small wins. Eventually, it can appear even before you begin. You may notice resistance the moment you think about starting something new. You open a blank document and feel tired. You consider sending an email and feel hesitation. You imagine success and feel uneasy. The body begins reacting before the event even happens. This is when anticipation becomes emotional memory. Your nervous system is no longer responding to current pressure. It is responding to remembered pressure. Past experiences of stress, expectations, or sudden change begin shaping present reactions. Without realizing it, the future starts feeling like the past. And when the future feels predictable in this way, motivation becomes complicated. Because motivation thrives on possibility, but emotional memory thrives on protection. Possibility says, this could go well. Protection says, be careful. This has felt heavy before. Both voices can exist at the same time. You may genuinely want to move forward, while simultaneously feeling an urge to slow down. This internal contradiction can feel confusing and frustrating. You ask yourself questions like, why do I lose motivation right when things start working? Why do I feel resistance toward goals I actually want? Why do I feel tired before I even begin? These questions often lead to self-criticism. You might label yourself inconsistent, undisciplined, unfocused, lazy. But self-criticism adds another layer of pressure. And pressure is exactly what the nervous system has been trying to reduce. So the cycle tightens. Pressure leads to tension. Tension leads to fatigue. Fatigue leads to slowing down. Slowing down leads to guilt. Guilt leads to more pressure. This loop can become emotionally exhausting. Not because you lack motivation, but because your emotional system is trying to balance two competing needs. The desire to grow and the need to feel safe. Growth requires movement. Safety often requires predictability. When life begins changing quickly, predictability decreases. New routines. New expectations. New possibilities. Even positive change disrupts familiarity. And familiarity is one of the nervous system's strongest signals of safety. Think about how many parts of your life are built around predictability. Morning routines, work patterns, social roles, daily habits. When progress accelerates, these patterns shift. Schedules change. Responsibilities increase. Identity evolves. Even subtle changes can feel destabilizing. You may begin to feel like your current life no longer fits your old routines, but your new routines haven't fully formed yet. This in-between state can feel uncomfortable. You are no longer where you were. But you are not fully where you are going. This emotional limbo can feel like uncertainty. And uncertainty often triggers caution. You might begin double-checking decisions. Overthinking plans. Delaying next steps. These behaviors are often described as procrastination, but they can also be understood as emotional pacing. Your nervous system may be trying to slow the rate of change so it can adapt. Because adaptation takes time. New identities take time to feel real. New routines take time to feel normal. New levels of responsibility take time to feel manageable. If change happens faster than emotional adaptation, tension increases. This tension is not a sign of failure. It is a sign of adjustment. But without understanding this, the tension can feel like resistance. You might assume that because something feels heavy, it must be wrong. You might interpret discomfort as a signal to stop. But discomfort can also be a signal that something is unfamiliar. And unfamiliar does not always mean unsafe. Still, the nervous system prefers certainty. And when certainty is missing, it searches for ways to recreate it. One of the easiest ways to recreate certainty is through familiar emotional states. Even if those states are uncomfortable. You may notice how familiar stress can feel strangely normal. Busy schedules. Urgent deadlines. Clear problems to solve. These situations can feel intense, but they also feel structured. You know what needs to be done. You know what the challenge is. You know where your attention should go. Stress can create clarity. Progress, on the other hand, can create openness. Open time. Open possibilities. Open futures. Openness can feel exciting, but it can also feel overwhelming. Because openness asks a new question. What now? When you were working towards something, your direction felt clear. But when progress begins appearing, the path branches. More options. More decisions. More responsibility. And with more options comes more uncertainty. The mind begins asking bigger questions. Is this the right direction? What should I focus on next? What if I make the wrong choice? These questions don't always have clear answers. And unclear answers can feel unsettling. The nervous system often prefers a known problem over an unknown future. A known problem feels manageable. An unknown future feels unpredictable. So sometimes, without realizing it, the mind gravitates toward familiar challenges. You might start focusing on small issues. Minor setbacks. New worries. Not because your life suddenly became more difficult, but because the nervous system is searching for familiar structure. This is how progress can quietly transform into pressure. Not because progress is dangerous, but because it introduces uncertainty. And uncertainty requires adaptation. Adaptation requires patience. But patience can feel uncomfortable when you are used to constant movement. You may feel like you should already know how to handle this new stage. You may expect yourself to feel confident, ready, or certain. But emotional adjustment rarely happens instantly. It happens gradually. And during this gradual adjustment, resistance often appears. Not as a sign that you should stop, but as a sign that your internal world is catching up to your external reality. This is where many people misinterpret their own experience. They assume the resistance means they don't want the progress. They assume the fatigue means they aren't capable. They assume the hesitation means they chose the wrong path. But what if the resistance is simply the nervous system asking for time? Time to adapt. Time to recalibrate. Time to feel safe in a new reality. Because safety is not only about avoiding danger. It is also about feeling familiar with your own life. And when your life begins changing, even in positive ways, familiarity needs to be rebuilt. Which leads to a deeper emotional question. What happens when your life begins changing faster than your sense of self can adjust? Up to this point, everything we've talked about has stayed close to daily life. Habits, emotions, routines, pressure, uncertainty. The things people feel but rarely pause long enough to examine. Now we can begin to gently introduce the deeper psychological layer behind all of this. Because what we are describing is not just a productivity issue. It is not simply motivation, discipline, or time management. It is a relationship between your nervous system and the idea of safety. And for many people, safety was never learned in moments of calm. It was learned in moments of tension. This is where the concept of emotional familiarity becomes important. The nervous system does not decide what is safe based on logic. It decides based on what is familiar. And familiarity is built early. Long before goals, careers, or adult responsibilities existed, your nervous system was learning how the world felt. Was the environment calm or tense? Was attention predictable or unpredictable? Was rest allowed or interrupted? Was success celebrated or followed by pressure? Children don't analyze these experiences intellectually. They absorb them emotionally and physically. The body learns the emotional climate of life long before the mind can explain it. If early life contained tension, unpredictability, or high expectations, the nervous system may begin associating activation with safety. Not comfort. Not happiness. But safety. Because safety does not mean pleasant. Safety means known. If a child grows up in an environment where love, attention, or stability appeared alongside pressure or stress, the nervous system begins linking those experiences together. Attention and tension. Achievement and pressure. Success and expectations. These pairings are not chosen consciously. They are learned through repetition. And repetition is how the nervous system builds its internal map of the world. By the time adulthood arrives, this map is deeply embedded. So when life becomes calm, spacious, or stable, the nervous system may not immediately recognize that state as safe. It recognizes tension more easily. It recognizes pressure more easily. It recognizes urgency more easily. Because those emotional states are familiar. This is why calm can feel uncomfortable. This is why rest can feel undeserved. This is why progress can feel unsafe. Not because something is wrong with you, but because your nervous system is comparing the present to emotional patterns it learned long ago. There is a psychological concept sometimes described as the comfort zone, but that phrase can be misleading. The comfort zone is not always comfortable. It is simply familiar. And the nervous system tends to prefer familiar discomfort over unfamiliar calm. This preference is not logical. It is protective. If your early experiences taught your nervous system that stability could change suddenly, then sudden stability in adulthood can feel suspicious. Your body may quietly ask, how long will this last? What will happen next? When will the pressure return? These questions do not always appear as thoughts. They appear as sensations. Tension in the shoulders. Restlessness in the body. Difficulty relaxing. A subtle feeling of waiting. Waiting for something to go wrong. Even when nothing is wrong. This is the nervous system preparing for change before change arrives. It is a form of emotional prediction. The brain is constantly trying to anticipate the future using the past as a reference point. If the past contains sudden changes, sudden expectations, or sudden pressure, the brain learns to stay ready. Staying ready becomes the baseline. And readiness requires tension. This is where the connection between success and discomfort begins to make sense. Because success often introduces calm periods. Moments where the crisis ends. Moments where the deadline passes. Moments where the effort pays off. But if calm was not historically safe, the nervous system may try to recreate readiness. Not consciously. Not intentionally. But automatically. You may begin searching for problems. focusing on potential mistakes, anticipating future pressure. This is sometimes called hypervigilance. A state where the nervous system remains alert even when no immediate threat exists. Hypervigilance does not always look dramatic. It can appear as overthinking, perfectionism, difficulty relaxing, constant mental scanning. The mind becomes a problem detector, even in peaceful moments. This is not because you want problems. It is because the nervous system believes readiness prevents danger. From the nervous system's perspective, tension equals preparation. Preparation equals safety. So when life becomes calm, the system may increase internal pressure to recreate the feeling of readiness. This is how success can quietly transform into anxiety. Not because success is threatening, but because calm feels unfamiliar. And unfamiliar experiences require new emotional learning. Your nervous system must learn that calm can be safe. That stability can last. That progress does not always lead to pressure. This learning process takes time. Because emotional learning happens through repetition, just like the original patterns were formed. You cannot think your way into emotional safety instantly. You experience your way into it gradually. Each time life becomes stable and nothing bad follows, the nervous system collects new data. Each time progress continues without sudden pressure, the system updates its predictions. Each time rest happens without guilt, the brain learns something new. But during this learning process, discomfort is normal. Because the nervous system is comparing two emotional realities at once. The old map and the new territory. The old map says tension equals safety. The new territory says calm can also be safe. Bridging this gap takes patience. It requires experiencing calm repeatedly until it becomes familiar. Until the body stops asking, what happens next? Until stillness stops feeling suspicious. Until progress stops feeling like exposure. This is not a quick transformation. It is a gradual recalibration. And during recalibration, resistance often appears. Not as a sign that something is wrong, but as a sign that the nervous system is updating its definition of safety. Which leads to an important realization. What if the discomfort you feel when things go well is not a flaw, but a sign that your nervous system is learning a new way to feel safe? If your nervous system learned that tension meant safety, then it makes sense that calm can feel unfamiliar. And if calm feels unfamiliar, your first reaction will not be relaxation. It will be uncertainty. This realization can be surprisingly relieving. Not because it instantly removes the discomfort, but because it changes how you interpret it. Instead of seeing your reactions as failure, you can begin to see them as adaptation in progress. Your mind and body are not working against you. They are trying to protect you using rules that once made sense. Rules that were built in a different environment. Rules that helped you navigate earlier stages of life. The problem is not that those rules existed. The problem is that your life has changed, and the rules have not fully updated yet. And updating emotional rules takes time. It happens through repetition, experience, and gentle exposure to new emotional states. Think about how any new environment becomes familiar. The first time you enter a new job, a new city, or a new role, everything feels heightened. You notice small details. You feel more alert. You think more carefully about your actions. Over time, the same environment becomes normal. The tension fades. The unfamiliar becomes familiar. The nervous system adapts. Emotional safety works in a similar way. If success, calm, or stability feel unfamiliar, your nervous system needs repeated experiences of those states before it stops treating them as uncertain. This is why the discomfort does not disappear overnight. It fades gradually. Through small moments of noticing that nothing bad happens after things go well. Moments of recognizing that rest does not lead to danger. Moments of realizing that progress does not always create pressure. Moments of seeing that stability can continue. These moments may feel subtle, but they are powerful. They are evidence that your emotional system is learning something new. And learning something new always involves a period of awkwardness. Think about any skill you have learned. Driving. Speaking a new language. Starting a new job. At first, everything feels effortful. You think about each step. You feel uncertain. You worry about mistakes. Over time, the same actions become natural. Not because the environment changed, but because your nervous system adapted. The same process can happen with emotional safety. Calm can become familiar. Rest can become normal. Progress can feel sustainable. But this transition requires patience. Because your nervous system is not only learning new experiences. It is also unlearning old predictions. Predictions that once helped you stay prepared. Predictions that once helped you stay alert. And letting go of old predictions can feel vulnerable. It can feel like lowering a guard you didn't realize you were holding. You may notice moments where you start to relax, and then quickly tense again. Moments where you feel hopeful, and then suddenly doubtful. This back and forth is not regression. It is recalibration. Your nervous system is testing new possibilities while still remembering old patterns. Gradually, the balance shifts. The moments of calm become longer. The moments of tension become shorter. The unfamiliar becomes familiar. This is how emotional change often happens. Not in dramatic breakthroughs, but in quiet shifts. Small adjustments that accumulate over time. One day, you may notice that progress feels slightly less threatening. Another day, you may notice that rest feels slightly more natural. These changes may feel subtle, but they are meaningful. They are signs that your internal world is catching up with your external reality. And as this alignment grows, the cycle we described earlier begins to change. Progress no longer automatically leads to pressure. Calm no longer automatically leads to tension. Success no longer automatically triggers doubt. Instead, new emotional associations begin forming. Progress can feel steady. Calm can feel safe. Stability can feel sustainable. This does not mean discomfort disappears completely. Change always involves uncertainty. Growth always involves adjustment. But the intensity of the reaction begins to soften. The nervous system learns that forward movement does not require constant readiness. That you can move forward without bracing for impact. That you can experience progress without expecting sudden pressure. And perhaps most importantly, that you can feel safe while your life is going well. This shift is not about becoming fearless or perfectly confident. It is about expanding what your nervous system recognizes as safe. Expanding your emotional comfort zone to include calm, stability, and progress. And when that expansion begins, the question that once felt confusing starts to feel clearer. Why did success feel uncomfortable? Because your nervous system was learning a new definition of safety. And what you are experiencing is not resistance to growth. It is the process of becoming familiar with a new version of your life. A version where moving forward does not require tension. A version where calm does not feel suspicious. A version where things going well does not mean something bad is about to happen. And what if the discomfort you feel right now is not a sign to stop, but a sign that your nervous system is slowly learning that it is safe to keep going?